in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Guys, we're smiling.
Hang on 1 second. Actually.
Coming up next, International Rugby Talk with Lewis, Pengelly, and McCarthy. Brought to you by Friends of the British Council. Everybody, welcome back to Rugby Wrap-Up. Matt McCarthy at the Fantasy Sports Network, Studio 34 in New York City, talking rugby, and we're taking it into international waters with Mr. Steve Lewis, our dashing Scotsman, and our debonair Englishman, Mr. Martin Pengelly of The Guardian U.S. Gentlemen, we've got international tests, including Team USA, playing in Houston against your Scottish team that you've made excuses for in other segments. Plus, we've got some other key matches across the globe. And so let's get right to it.
Yeah, so a packed calendar last weekend in international rugby. But before we get to that, we really have to discuss the biggest result in international sport last weekend. Sunday, Rayburn Place in Edinburgh, Scotland, the forces of good and light defeated England at cricket. One-day international for the first time ever. Anyway, moving along.
And that's why I don't like cricket.
Rugby-wise, Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere, resounding victories for Southern Hemisphere, 3-0. Australia paid to Ireland's 8-run undefeated Test match run. England in a fantastic game. I watched this game. It's the best game of rugby I've seen in a long time. Got pipped at the post by South Africa. So that's 5 in a row for them. I'm sure Martin will have some comments about Eddie. Argentina lost at home to Wales. That's surprising. And the way we've got to start looking at this now, who's in the Eagles group in the World Cup? We've got a horrendous group. We've got England, we've got France, and we've got Argentina. So we should start looking at those fixtures going forward. Scotland got by an average, not an average Scotland side, but a relatively inexperienced Scotland side got past a pretty poor Canadian side, 48-10 in Edmonton. They're going to be a little stronger this week. They're probably going to save the strongest team for the Argentina test, but you're going to see a stronger Scotland team in Houston. So back to Martin.
Back to me.
You can either discuss cricket, England 5-0, their five-match losing run, or Eddie Jones arguing about pinotage with South African fans.
I know what we're
Up to
not
you.
going to talk about. We're not going to talk about cricket. And
I'm not going to talk about cricket.
I got the bell at the ready in case anybody mentions cricket again. Go ahead, Martin.
No cricket. 5-match run, as I told Mr. Lewis earlier, the Barbarians game is like, and this is an English reference, counting general studies as a real A-level, which it isn't. The Barbarians game doesn't count. It's a 4-match run losing, which is, of course, still bad, but, Lewis needs to be put into his box.
Would it have counted if it was a win?
No.
Okay.
Not a proper game. I mean, did they award caps? They may have done, because caps are given out with confetti these days, but it's not a proper test match. That's not one to count. It doesn't actually matter, because 4 losses in a row is serious. England are in a bit of a hole. I'm interested in the altitude question for Ellis Park and for Bloemfontein again this weekend. There's debate about how you should prepare to play there if you're not from there, whether you should be there for a week or whether you should fly up 24 hours before a game. Neither of which England did. They turned up on the Thursday, and some people said they got it wrong, and that's why they were, use a technical rugby phrase, blowing out their asses at the end of the game and lost.
It'll make for an interesting sound effect in the post-production with Johnny Lewis.
It will, yes. I'm sure he's probably got a specialized cushion available. But
you should have written about. I blame this on you. I put the blame on you on this because your Denver Broncos play in a high altitude, and you've seen their opposition come in there and get smoked because they weren't prepared for the altitude. You should have written an article about this and posted it, and Eddie Jones would have known.
Maybe I should. Maybe I was also interested. There was a reference earlier in the program to the effect of the air when people go to play in Glendale. I'd like to know whether it's true, because it seemed to me to have receded as an issue in pro rugby in the amateur days, like when England were there in '94, the last amateur tour. That was a big issue that people talked about. You had to be ready to play at altitude. The Lions in '97, I can remember, went up to Bloemfontein to play the Free State on the day and played the best. Still, I think the best performance any British or Irish team has ever put in. It's gone away as an issue, as if people think pro athletes, it doesn't affect them. And as soon as that happened to England on Saturday, the English press came out and said they've screwed up on the altitude. I don't know what's true about playing at altitude. I'd like to know. I think it's a very interesting issue. Did Eddie Jones get it wrong, or is it irrelevant?
I think
Eddie Jones is never wrong, right? Steve, go ahead.
I think it's irrelevant. So having lived at altitude in Vail for 10 years, 8,500, and then lived in Denver for 10 years after that, You're right. The distinctions between amateur and pro teams. Pro teams, not an excuse. Two theories. One is to fully acclimatize to altitude, you have to go in, and it takes 3 weeks. That's impossible in the modern tour and the modern game. So the prevailing theory in modern teams is that you go in the day before and you get on with it. You should be fit. You should be able to deal with it. So England didn't use it as an excuse. So to me, non-issue these days with pro teams.
I think wasn't
psychological.
I wasn't saying England used it as an excuse, but the press were keen to. They not as an excuse. They were keen to use it as a bat to hit Eddie Jones with because he's getting hit more often now.
He's lost 5 in a row.
4 in a row.
Oh, you're not counting the Barbarians.
No.
Okay.
Like I said, it's like general studies.
It's 5. It's 5. It's 5. The math is 5. I'm objective. As objective as an Irishman can be about England, I am saying yes.
So another big issue. I'm not sure if you saw the All Blacks France game, but on the sighting, there was a pretty bad incident. It didn't result in anything from the referee during the game, and it bizarrely wasn't cited after the game. Did you see any of that or have
It took me a long time to hunt it down. I didn't see it live because I was news editing. It took me time to actually hunt it down and find these incidents going on because it's a heavy charge to lay at anyone. But when All Blacks do things in New Zealand, the coverage is different.
Fracture skull.
All Blacks in New Zealand. We'll be back with All Blacks in New Zealand and the things they get away with just after this. No, so all right. So we are basically out of time, unfortunately. But Steve,
a couple of things we got to very quickly acknowledge. World Series is over in sevens. It finished in Paris last week. The U.S. finished the season in 6th place. Perhaps a little disappointing, but they had a lot of injuries this year, so I think it's okay. They got some, Mike Friday knows his stuff, and they'll be fine going into the World Cup in San Fran. Perry Baker's back at training. He'll be good to go. That's important. On the women's side of things, they finished with a little momentum. They picked up in the last 2 tournaments. They finished 5th in the series, and so they are going into the World Cup looking perhaps a little sharper. So both teams, 6th and 5th, there or thereabouts, opportunity at the World Cup. Final point, ex-New York Athletic Club coach Billy Millard, ex-director of Rugby in America Billy Millard, has got another job today. He went from here to Connaught to Cardiff, and he's now director of rugby at Harlequins, so good luck to him.
You are as polished as anybody I know with your segues. It's almost as polished as your wardrobe.
I thank you, darling.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Martin, any final points?
I just want to, Steve put me in mind of a final point about the 7th series, which is that my 2 most impressive moments of the season were both perpetrated by Americans in the 7s. There was Perry Baker's try against Fiji. Thanks for the pitch, sort of drunk stagger one to start with. Absolutely extraordinary. Can't get enough of watching it. But also Aleph Kelter for the women against Canada with the tackle, turnover, ruck and try.
Great stuff.
Absolutely extraordinary stuff. And as Steve says, well placed for the World Cup.
And it was nice to see Madison Hughes back in the squad with Team USA. But on that note, I want to, Steve, put the gun to you. Scotland visiting Houston to play Team USA. What's the result going to be?
Scotland to win.
What's the score?
Tricky one. I think this is the best Eagles team we've had in a long time, both in terms of fitness. I think they'll hang in longer, probably to the 50, 60-minute mark. I still think, depending on who the Scotland team they pick, hard to say without seeing the lineups.
Just pick Steve? Yeah.
Scotland should win by 15-20.
15-20, Martin?
I hate to agree with Steve because he's Scottish, but probably right. I think Scotland, Townsend, any team Townsend coaches plays with pace. They've got depth. I think they'll be too quick for the Eagles, but 15 points, the Eagles scoring a few too.
I think that Team USA is going to knock off Scotland. The fat, beer-bellied, soft, fair-skinned sissies from Scotland are going to melt in the Houston night, and America is going to triumph by 5 points in a dramatic victory.
That's you hurt me the way you speak. That's a racist and hurtful word.
Yes, because that's what we do here. And quick final thoughts. Any final question for you, Martin? Are you ticked off that the Scotsman, Greg Townsend, is pilching Danny Wilson from Wasps after he left Cardiff to be his forwards coach?
No.
All right. Don't hold back, Martin. Don't hold back. And on that note, we are out of time. And on behalf of my colleagues, Mr. Steve Lewis and Mr. Martin Pengelly, I'm Matt McCarthy at the Fantasy Sports Network, Studio 34 in New York City, signing off.